Thanks for coming on a rainy night, but we have a very good reason for all of you to be here. My name is Sarah Bartlett. I'm the dean here, and this is our 10th anniversary, so we've been having some key people in the universe come and speak with us on topics that are important, and this is obviously going to be, I think it is our last one this year, and our save the best for last, we could argue, for David Kenny, who's the IBM Watson guy, and Jeff Jarvis, who needs no introduction. Anyway, thanks for coming. We are a graduate school here. If anyone knows anyone who wants to study journalism, we are the place to come and study it. And we also have a lot of evening workshops and weekend workshops for people who are working full-time and don't want to leave their places of work. So come and check us out, but in the meantime, enjoy the evening. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, boss. You can always applaud the boss. It's a good thing to do. Hi, I'm Jeff Jarvis. David Kenny, I've known for some years now, through many lives. Before I knew him, it's the most amazing resume to me. Before I knew him, you were a partner at Bain. Did you wear ties then?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Then was co-founder of Digitas. So David was a real leader in the new world of digital advertising. And you can blame him for part of it, but you can also thank him for supporting the things you love because of that. Then became an executive at, Digitas was bought by Publicis, right? And became an executive there. The last title was the managing partner at Viviki, the horribly named Viviki at Publicis. Then, this is the odd twist, went to Akamai as president there. So a very technology-based job. Then I thought you were nuts, went to what became the Weather Company, the Weather Channel, and I said, David, what the hell? Little did I know that David was in his furtive brain was building a crowdsourced data company around that, right? And then that was bought. He sold that, as you know, to IBM, and then David took over Watson at IBM. Did I get that all right?
Yep.
So David has this incredible experience across media and technology. And I think that's why I was so interested in having him come and speak to us here. And now, of course, David is, as his habit, he's on the hot edge. So AI. AI is going to solve everything, or it's going to ruin the world. Whatever it is, there you are. Start with a little bit of primer for us, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Is it AI? Is it learning systems? Is it neural networks? First definitionally, what does Watson do? What do you do there?
All right. So that whole arc was around data.
Yes.
So those jobs weren't as random as they sounded. They were all around data. And so when you get to AI, where to begin? So artificial intelligence is a set of technologies that can reason the way the mind can reason. And so the original set of technologies, so 6 years ago, if you saw Watson on Jeopardy, those were all inductive reasoning. So originally, it learned facts, known facts, and then it could find them again. So this happened before us with Google. Semantic search was the beginning of machine learning. I think what we learned to do at Watson was to learn facts that don't live on the internet and to go deeper with that, number one, and then also to facts can be put into language, so you learn natural language processing and natural language generation. So you can ask it a question, it can find an answer, and it can bring the question back as an answer in natural language. And that's those handful of services are where we were 6 years ago. And so, and I would say that was AI is the broad field. Within that is machine learning. Machine learning does live on a neural network. A neural network is the technology to be able to make that reasoning work by iterating through and figuring it out the way our brains are doing. Since then, I would say the last 6 years, a lot of what I've been focused on now is the problems of the world are not going to be just solved with known facts. Even though I'm in a news business, facts are the beginning, but then you need to create. So the solution to cancer, the solution to any sort of health problem, the solution to climate change, the solution to traffic, the solution to agriculture are all creating new solutions. And so then you have to begin to reason in deductive ways and, more importantly, in abductive ways. so that took a couple things. One, you had to learn things that were deeper. So when you had to watch a film, read an X-ray, you had to go from machine learning to deep learning. All deep learning means is that there are more layers to the object you're learning. So it's a subset of machine learning, still running on different forms of neural nets. But then the reasoning is where I think the real advances have been, is we've been able, ultimately I say the great value of AI will not be when it gives us the answer, it'll be when it asks us the questions. And as it's beginning.
As in, have you tried this? Have you figured?
Yeah.
Have you thought
So
about
when we
this?
use Watson for drug discovery, it's kind of a known fact what all chemicals and combinations of chemicals do. So it proposes new recipes, if you will. Now we do that for food too, and that's fun. That's called Chef Watson. But what's interesting is when you do it for drug discovery, to find new solutions that haven't existed before. And so it can propose a hypothesis. It can propose a hypothesis to a traffic problem. It can propose a hypothesis. One of the things I keep focused on, because I still very much believe in climate change, and in order to solve that problem, you have to sort of say, what system would produce less energy than it consumes? And it proposes solutions that iterate towards that answer. And I think this is always going to be this partnership between man and machine, where it proposes answers and we get them. So I would say the front edge of AI today is this next level of reasoning, and that's a lot of what we're working on today.
So I wanted to talk for some chunk here about AI and journalism and speculate about that.
Okay.
And when I asked David to do this, he kind of looked and said, I don't know. And I don't either. But I'd love to speculate and speculate later with all of you as well as to how we could use this. Let me start with my fondest wish.
What to be careful of.
Exactly. We'll get to that too. So there's the obvious things which we'll get to in a second, but let me start here. Journalism is fundamentally reductive. Everything that every complex system out there in the world, we think we can reduce to an 800-word article.
Yep.
And you're welcome. We've done it for you. And that brings with it much impact, right? It affects how we cognate the world, and we say, oh, the world's that simple. It can be summed up in 800 words. Okay, there's a red and blue, and that's how the world is operated, right?
Some people think it's 120 characters, so.
That's true. That too, yes.
800 words is too many to read.
Well, until you do a tweet storm now, at least that brings back some measure of complexity. The world is obviously complex.
Yeah.
And my fondest hope for what AI and learning machines can do is to start to map complexity better than we can in journalism. To see, for example, I've seen a lot of research being done right now on the flow of memes and what we like to call, unfortunately, fake news now. Yep. To understand, and I talked to a scientist at Daimler in Germany some months ago, and he was regretting that comments are being turned off on news sites. And he said, if you just left them all on and you put them into a learning system and you taught that learning system certain things about them, you could probably have seen the alt-right rise up. Mm-hmm. You probably could have seen the way it spread. You probably could have seen the connections that enabled it to be birthed. So my fondest hope for what Watson can do for us is to bring back a sense of a more complex world. Am I crazy?
But then you have to simplify it so people understand it and know what to do with it and care about it. Mm-hmm. So, listen, first of all, it's certainly doable. So if I connect to the weather experience,
yeah.
The atmosphere and the oceans are pretty complicated, mm-hmm. and they're always in motion, and we can't really know what they're on. And the models we built, and we had systems to measure the atmosphere. We had weather forecasting from around World War II. And they had about an 88% accuracy or a 12% error rate about precipitation and temperature 3 days out as one model. And in the last 5 years, we've reduced that to 4%. So it took 2/3 of the error out, all by collecting more data and better predicting mm-hmm. the future. We did it by running it more often, so we went from a model on a mainframe that ran every 6 hours to one that runs every 15 minutes. We moved it from a television to a mobile phone, which moved it from 2 million locations to 3 billion. And we vastly increased the amount of data we collect. And this actually is very useful for It's great to know whether to bring your umbrella tonight, but it's very useful for agriculture and energy trading and traffic patterns and reducing air turbulence and all those sorts of things. So it's totally doable. I do it today in health systems, measuring the human body, reading genomes, predicting from genomes what's likely to happen to a person and giving them the chance to change those outcomes to some extent. So certainly you could read all those systems in the same way. In the case of health, people really care whether they're going to live longer and happy lives. In the case of weather, people really do care. So the trick will be, how do you still boil that all down to a metric, to a color code, to a set of adjectives,
To a visualization.
that help people comprehend it, because you still need to simplify the complex. So you can read the complex, you can find patterns, but then you still need to bring those patterns back in a way that people respond to them.
What makes what's good meat to your machine? What kind of data, in the sense of public policy and public information, government news, behavior, what's needed?
So all the AI is predictive, right? So the reasoning is I infer X is Y, I infer the answer to this Jeopardy question is that. So the trick is to actually have an answer, or I predict the weather, right? The trick is to have an answer, because then you say, I predicted it correctly or I predicted it incorrectly. The incorrect is way more useful, because then you adjust the algorithm. So part of the way we improve the weather forecast is by collecting the data from windshield wipers, because when people turn the windshield wiper on, that told you that's where the rain began. Then you knew it was raining or not raining, and then you could say, I predicted or didn't predict it in this location, and that helped you. So it's just an example. So I think by analogy, if you want to know whether something is fake or false or misleading, this is what it said, this is what was understood by the reader. Some of this is, and this is what actually happened. So anything that can give us facts is helpful. What's not helpful is, or what's less helpful, is for someone to make a judgment, because then you're learning bias and judgment. And I always say fake news is in the eyes of the judger. But in all of this stuff we're doing, it's important that there be ground truth. I guess this is what we described as ground truth. When we did, we ingested all the medical records of Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital as the foundation of Watson for oncology, and it was really helpful. But what was important is not just the oncologist diagnosis, but validating truths on what actually went on with that patient over her life or his life, so that you had more ground truth of what actually happened, not just what was predicted to happen or diagnosed to happen. So all that being said, the things that can get us closest to ground truth are the most useful things that will train the models of the future.
So when you say predict, I agree and I get that, but that also plays to one of journalists' worst habits, is to think, in the words of Jay Rosen at NYU, the way that political journalists prove they're savvy is to keep on predicting what's going to happen in the election.
Yeah, but that's opinion, that's not.
Well, they think that I agree. I'm going to go somewhere. The problem with prediction is it doesn't do jack to inform the electorate. It doesn't do journalism's real job.
Yes.
But having said that, let's stay on the predictions for a second.
Okay.
Did you, first question is, in your secret laboratory, were you running numbers on the election beforehand? Were you running predictions? Were you looking at that?
So Watson.
And how'd you get it?
Watson's an open platform where people. So part of what I would say is that smart people in multiple parties, as recently as last Saturday in France, use Watson, right?
Yeah.
So it's that we don't do it. So part of our model versus the Google model is that Google has very good deep learning and machine, very good at DeepMind. But it's more one model because it was built off semantic search, and it's kind of all about all the information in the world should be accessed through here. Yep. It is my belief that the first wave of digital disruption, and this does affect news, first wave of digital disruption, which I was involved in, by and large, gave the economics to distribution. If you could search for things or find it or aggregate in portal. And because that's where the advertising money was. in the AI world, where you're actually helping to make decisions, the value should go to the content, not to the distribution. Because the more data you have, the more facts you have, the more you can train the model, the better off it is. And so therefore, our whole system was built to allow people to train their own models. So therefore, if you have data, like survey data, research data, that you believe is insightful, you can use it to train a model to help you use it, but that hasn't trained the general model, so your competition can't use the same one. So that, all I'm saying, so in this particular case where people are competing with each other on insights, I believe that people were training the models in different ways to look at different things, and then it's who had the best facts.
You had no insight into what they were doing with your platform. They were doing that on their own?
We don't, yeah.
You don't know that, right, right.
It's set up so we can't know.
Well, and Google uses the odd notion of searches to make predictions. So you say that the value shifts to the content, but the content is not necessarily what we think of content. The reduction is the data. Yes. So the value goes to the data, to the ground truth.
So well, but I think the trick is you got to figure out how to keep yourself rooted in the data. Data becomes fact, and fact is information, and that's the foundation of news, right? So that
we hope.
it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
So then the trick is, how do you separate that from the opinion and the value add and the rest you put around it, which may be useful, but if the opinions become confused with fact, you don't have ground truth.
And fact, in your world, I mean, one thing that fascinates me about the notion of AI is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the systems are fuzzier because they're constantly testing. They're constantly trying different, right? So it's not a simple, it's not a binary. There's fuzzy edges around things to get closer to a truth and not necessarily get to it. True?
So the algorithms are fuzzy because we don't have all the known facts, right? It's statistics.
So it wants to try and try and try.
So the inferences have to get better, but the inferences become closer to, the inferences infer the actual truth and actual prediction, the more we have known ground truth about what actually happened. Right. So it is known what happened, right? Whether we predicted it or not is different, but it is known what happened.
So any thoughts that, so when I asked you to do this and you said, oh, you know, have you had any thoughts since?
Jeff Jarvis, I always do what you ask. Don't you all?
Have you had any thoughts since about the coming in the cab up here? What opportunity, we as journalists, what opportunities we would have in using Watson, in using AI, and the further question later will be what should we journalists know to do that? But just as an industry, health does a good job of this because they are trying for a ground truth. Weather works. We are working in fuzzier world, and we don't work in fact enough. But having given that caveat, what do you think the opportunities could be for journalism and AI?
So I think that there's a couple of things, right? And I don't know how to solve them. So here's, I'll tell you what concerns me. So even on the, people who use the Weather Channel mobile app, we use AI to actually write the little forecast about what's going to happen. And we started using it for the headlines.
Oh.
And so here's the problem that I feel, right? So that's why we still need editors. So that the ground truth that we started with was how many people clicked on it.
No.
Right? Because that's where you make them money.
That's your advertising world coming back, right?
My business model is entirely that way. So
yes, right.
I cared about that.
Yep.
But Watson became the worst clickbait machine on the planet. Because it kept getting reward. It kept, you know, the models reward and adjust that word, amazing, incredible, you won't believe, became.
It really did that.
It totally started putting it in everything, like, it's going to be an amazing sunny day. You won't believe your eyes.
Bad, Watson, bad.
So you have to actually teach taste, right? But so one is that. The second thing that it can do is that it then began to, the algorithms would predict you to actually write different headlines for different people, right? As you're heading towards personalization. And on one hand, you think that's one. So on one hand, when we had to measure the right thing, personalization was very useful. So in the case of because we now do this around the world. And in the case of typhoons in certain countries, only 35 countries in the world have a weather service. So we're used to this in America, but if a typhoon hits India, chances are they've never been instructed on what it means. There's no government ability to communicate it. It just comes and wipes them out. So we want to change that. So we built a whole system so the phones still work through peer-to-peer, even though the cell coverage has gone down, and to communicate this. But it turns out that different people need different words to know what to do if you in a typhoon. And they take, so this whole like how to mobilize people, how to make them understand that it's dangerous, how to understand you should move away from it, not toward it. It's, crazy things like tsunamis suck the water out and then people go to get their boats not knowing the water's coming back. Right. So all this education stuff mattered. And personalized education helped people understand it better than a general education. So that was useful.
That's the good part.
So personalized news, in one hand, because news is partially education, would help people better understand it. The flip side is personalization then becomes taste, and then people tend to resonate with news that they already believe, that fits what they already believe. And it's the opposite side, right? So, I would say, and I keep going back to weather because it's easy. Health has got a lot of the same issues, which is, how do you use AI to help people discover things that they should understand, that are adjacent to what they're understanding? How do you get people to understand different points of views than ones that they naturally believe? Maybe watch the other cable news channel, but because you should do this, right? And how do you help people understand that, and how do you connect to the things they're already resonating with something that might be in a different direction? And so that whole, like, how do we introduce discovery? How do we introduce alternate point of view in a acceptable way is helpful. And it's hard because the economics aren't there. If you just run your Watson machine, whatever it's going to be, for your news, and you let the business side of the house run it, you'll have a lot of clickbait and news that reinforces what people already believe.
Right. So,
and it'll leave us there to generate that, right? So this is why the whole systems begin to
so when you said
create multiple parallel universes.
You have to teach it taste, you have to teach it standards, you also have to teach it then a different outcome. The fundamental, I was going to get to advertising later, but.
Well, how do you measure the outcome of somebody actually learned a fact?
Bingo.
And how do we measure that and know that that's true? And
so, right. So I heard Facebook could do that in this way. Facebook has a word that they made up, which we make fun of them for, called informedness, the state of being informed. I don't think it's in a dictionary. And they can ask people, do you think you're informed about this? They can then ask them what they know and don't know. They and Google know what they've read and haven't read. They know how long they've spent on it. Between Facebook and Google, I think you could have a sense, you'd have to have the input from the person. You have to know what their action is. But if you said that the outcome is an informed public, is that a data set that's possible to get to in that process?
Maybe.
Okay.
First of all, I really don't like a world where Google and Facebook are deciding who's informed and who isn't. That's ceding a certain amount of power.
Stipulated, Your Honor. Yes, I agree.
Back to all the value goes to distribution.
Then we're back right back where we started. Yes.
So,
Well, then whoever has. So what do you need? I know what you've read. Or what could I know? I could know what you've read. I could know what you've asked for. I could know what you do with that knowledge. I could quiz you on your knowledge. I could see the impact in your larger cohort of what that knowledge does.
You could do all of that.
You could do all that, right?
We go to school, we take exams, we get graded. These things all happen. So it's doable. I would like more standards than a commercial enterprise doing it. So I got to think about that, right? So I just think about like the work I do in oncology or radiology or law. I actually like that doctors do peer review and
Yep.
figure out whether there's an insight. So I think the issue is I want peer review versus,
Okay.
I think peer review is a better way to know than inductive. I think the issue is how do you get a diverse set of peers versus a set of peers that are just, my cohort, people who believe what I believe. Because it's the these systems lead you to self-fulfilling.
That's pretty easy to track now. There's been plenty of maps of Twitter of the reds over there and the blues over there, and they don't connect and all that. So we could know how to connect.
But informativeness would be actually somebody who was equally understood by both because they were actually factual and people cared about that. So trying to figure out how to solve a peer review part of that versus a score awarded to you by Facebook or Google, which it makes my,
Get the rash.
Well, no, because you've just created a different problem.
Exactly.
So I don't love that, but I love the idea, and I think I'm a huge believer in crowdsourcing of all things, and so if we can find a way to do it, that would be helpful. Then I think the issue is, how do we get people to care?
Right.
Right. So, as you know, a lot of my work is my passion in weather and before was around the climate. The facts are super clear. There's no scientific writer, no one who cares about facts in journalism who won't write about the perils of climate change and how real it is.
Yes.
There is no debate on this by any fact base. But yet, the solution to it is a common solution, which would help the planet, but it isn't necessarily convenient for all the actors. So therefore, people ignore it or change it, all sorts of stuff. So the same thing is true here. It's like, how do we get people, facts have a common good, but how do we make them have an individual good? And this is part of what so I've been trying to think about the motivation of, if I know facts, what makes my life better, what makes my decisions better, versus if I live in my own bubble.
Yes.
Right? Because the AI isn't going to solve that. The AI can help know what facts are there. And the reason I believe in crowdsourcing is the more checks and balances you have on the fact, the more likely it is that it really is a fact. But then the second part is you got to connect that fact back to why it's important for people.
Which is why, so I don't know if you saw Jimmy.
Did
you see Jimmy Wales' announcement last night?
Oh, and
Wiki Tribune.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm listed as an advisor. I'm not compensated or have any equity in it. But it's fascinating because it has professional journalists, paid journalists, working alongside the public. The public's role is to help fact check.
Yes, exactly.
So that's the peer review you're talking about. If there's enough of that.
That feels to me, yes, I like the idea.
All right, so because where I head here is to, this is not where I thought I was going to go, this is good, where you utterly reinvent news, not even as an industry yet, but as a profession, as a trade, as an institution. And if you had that role of knowing how to gather the fact, how to verify the fact, how to verify that how to make people care about the fact, hardest yet, how to verify that they've absorbed the fact, and then what the impact of that knowledge is.
Yep.
That's the string you need. Yes?
Yes.
And technology could be helpful at various points along the way, but only if we have data.
Which you can get.
Which we can get, but not in the way we're set up now. We don't even do user profiling. We don't know you as an individual. We're still in mass media mode. Google and Facebook are personal services companies. News organizations are mass companies. The business model that you properly decried earlier that leads to clickbait is trying to move the mass media business model into this new world, and it doesn't fit, does it?
But why wouldn't it fit? Why wouldn't it fit? So it's because you're right. I mean, everything we're doing, and if I go back to sort of, solving health problems, that's all very personalized medicine. Everything we're doing in education, AI for education is very much about personalized learning. So the economy is driving more value to the individual. The individual has to have, individual is the solution to this problem.
Right.
There just has to be an individual incentive to help solve the problem.
And there has to be an individual delivery of relevance and value to the individual, which we don't do in mass media. And we don't do in mass marketing. And we don't do in mass manufacturing. We want you all to use the same thing. And when we predicate the risk on hoping you all will, that's what was possible before. That's the industrial age. Now, you're right, you're heading toward an individualized world with the danger stipulated, right, that we need to break you out of that too. That's part of the value we can do, but we can do that. But we're not at all prepared in journalism. We still put out one product for everybody. Put out a TV channel or a newspaper, looks the same online, still the same thing. It doesn't know what you know and what you don't know. It doesn't know what your context is. It doesn't know, it just thinks that 800-word article is going to solve everything for everybody. Isn't that screwed up?
Well, you're not going to solve truth that way.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're fighting against a trend in general. It's of what's happening in social media, which is far more personalized. Right. What's happening in the algorithms that are teeing up which stories get read by which people. I think the challenge is the editing is moving to be personalized faster than the journalism itself. So
yes, editing by the crowd.
Editing by the crowd, editing by the individual, editing by the delivery mechanism, right? So this is, it's happening, and people are picking stories or pieces of stories. So I'll tell you, so we're to continue on this, right? Mm-hmm. We haven't done it in news. This is my worry as this gets done in news. In movie trailers, so Watson has started to make movie trailers. Watson made several successful movie trailers. What's interesting right now is we're starting to do movie trailers more in like subscription services like HBO Go or something, because they want to keep you watching, but different people watch for different reasons. So we'll take the same movie or the same series. This trailer will be for middle-aged men, and this trailer will be for kids. This trailer will be for women, like have a lot of emotion. This will be all action. Same exact movie. It's just which 30 seconds of the movie did you pick out?
Right.
Apply that to news stories. I'm just going to pick out the part that I care about, right?
If your economic motivation is still based on reach and volume rather than on value.
Well, that's on the publishing side. I'm talking about the individual.
Individuals
make themselves feel better by just seeking news that's confirming of their point of view.
Yes, and the data would point us that way, but I don't think that has to be.
Things they disagree with. People retweet things that they agree with.
Yes, but I also think the fact that there are arguments online is an indication that you're aware of a different side. You're aware that there's a debate. You're aware of that. You may choose to go only so far in it, but you're aware that it's there.
I love when there are arguments online. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I wish there were more.
Yeah.
And in fact, and so that's why I go back to AI. When AI is actually spurring the debate, it's more useful than when it's giving you the answer.
Right. So AI is giving you the questions and hypotheses.
I see this point of view and I see that point of view. Which do you think it is? Help me know what's true and not true. Let the crowd actually answer that.
So play that farther a little more. Take climate change as news. How would you play with that?
So if the neural nets consumed everything on climate change, they would have a strong hypothesis about climate change being real, caused by humans, dangerous to humans, and fixable by humans. And then you have a group of people who said it's random, it's not caused by humans, there's nothing we can do about it, it's a waste of time and money to be wrong. And it could put both out and actually, and AI algorithms do this, they actually lay out 72% of my conclusion is by this fact, and 22% is by this, and 4% is by this. So it could lay it out, and then it could say, and because we do this in other fields, which is true. Like, to believe this, you believe this, these 3 facts, and to believe this, you believe these 3 facts, and then you could create mechanisms for people to verify with fact which was more true.
So it's based on that fact, and it's also giving you a probability of certainty in that.
And once you've done that, then that is no longer it moves from being deductive to inductive. You know it's a fact, So it's a fact forever until somebody can prove that the fact wasn't true. So then it becomes part of the fact base, right? So, but I think telling people which facts matter. So if you got to the climate change, because we ran these models, what you get to is the biggest fact we're missing is what's happening at the bottom of the oceans. Because the oceans are absorbing, the reason we haven't all burned up yet is that the oceans, thank God, are absorbing a lot of heat and is at the bottom. But it's something, the more things have changed at the bottom of the oceans, the more trouble's on the way, because that will eventually come back up. Right? So, and we have sensors in the atmosphere, we have satellites, we've got ground stations, we got weather balloons, but we don't have a lot on the bottom of the oceans. So you might say it's worth $1 trillion to do exploration at the bottom of the ocean. And this could actually help us figure that out, and then we might be able to actually, I don't know that you can crowdsource people swimming at the bottom of the ocean. They probably won't make it.
North Korean submarines.
Perhaps, right? Or American submarines. Right?
Yeah.
You could figure out a way. So that's of a missing fact. I think there are other facts that are asserted, where are the girls in Africa, that you could then, crowdsource some answers to, and that could help you.
I'll use a Google example, climate change. A few months ago, if you went to Google and searched for climate change, you would get, in my view, decent results. If, however, your search query was, is climate change real? Half of them were hinky, right? And what Google was doing in that case was trying to serve the user's query, right? And I think in the mind's eye of the Google computer, there's a sweaty guy in underwear in a bunker somewhere, right? And my response to that was, well, no, it could be a third grader asking that question. Are you really going to poison her mind with this crap? Now, if you go to Google, or if I go to Google, of course we both have different Googles, but if I go to Google and I make each query, I get pretty much the same results.
Yep.
So what that means is that Google, which says we just reflect the world, we don't have a bias, I think that means they were making a bias toward the institution of science. I think. And, right, and that's good and bad, right? Your eyes flashed a little fear of, oh, Google's making these decisions, and we don't really want Google to make those decisions. However, Google's being manipulated. Google says it's a mirror to the world. And Google's mirror may be straight and true, but the world's cracked for Google's benefit, right? And so Google's got to recognize the manipulation that occurs for its benefit so that it can adjust. It does that in spam. Does it have to do that around truth?
Well, can it, right? So then it has to know what the truth is.
Bingo.
It didn't know the truth on that. I don't think that, I mean, knowing those algorithms, I think it was more likely that people were getting more value.
This happened in a pretty short time after the fake news thing. I think they made an adjustment. Yeah, I'm not sure. No, it wasn't blocking, because Google would say that if you want to go search for Holocaust deniers, you will find them. They're there. They're not going to cut that out. Facebook would say, except for the worst of the worst, we don't want to kill stuff.
Yeah, so they certainly could have adjusted the weighting more.
Right, they have to do, right? If there's
in favor of more truthful or more known to be truthful.
But isn't that interesting?
It was more. Yeah, so yes, maybe those are more science-based, but.
So at a simplistic level, every journalist these days fears that you're going to take over their primary function, which is writing stories. Can you? Certainly we see narrative science does it with structured data in sports stories and financial stories.
Yep.
And articles are just another form of data visualization, and it puts it out there. We think we're storytellers. And that's our highest art. I would argue it's not. It's informing the public, but I lose that argument often. So we think we're storytellers. Are you going to take over that function of storytelling?
No, but we might help.
Okay. Says corporate.
No,
here to help.
It says me, right?
Okay.
I'm
No. I mean, I'm corporate. I'm here to help.
Oh yeah.
The old joke.
I got that. Yeah.
Sorry.
Now, I'm thinking about this because you do go down this road. So today people will use us. So when companies issue earnings releases, Watson will synthesize the earnings release and predict what's happening in the stock within 30 seconds, right? So it can just go faster than a human. And there are people who absolutely act on this.
Oh,
I don't tell them to. Right? But they built these models to do this, right? Because they don't want to lose the time to actually read it. Right? So, I go back to, all news, all facts. If the first information is if the first job is to get the information out, and the latency on the information has negative value, then you want to get out faster. And sometimes the machines can do that faster than humans. Machines issue tornado warnings and blizzard warnings and stuff much faster than.
Right. Well, in that case, they're issuing the conclusion. The question, in addition, is whether they can
issue the fact along the way
and put it in put it in a form that is most absorbable by a human.
So listen, I think they're largely, patterns. So the storytelling is going to be pretty basic. But what if I go to so I would say, first of all, they can be very helpful in getting to the facts faster. And in some cases, the facts are going to go out with the storytelling to follow, and it may be disconnected. So here's the fact. Now let's explain what's going to happen. I'm not sure it's going to stay you all get the fact, absorb it, put color on it per perspective, write 800 words around it. People might find more value, and we have this problem today where wrong facts get out too fast because we're in this race. Machines are going to actually speed that up even further. We have to train the machines to actually have a better job of checking what's a fact or not.
Right.
Because I don't think anybody's, the first out is always going to win, right? So I think you got to figure that part out, and then you got to say, okay, well, how do you wrap it in a story? So can we help in wrapping the story? I think we can help understand the emotional reactions to the storytelling. So today at the Tribeca Film Festival, I was on the stage with Kid to Rock. He used Watson for lyrics and harmonies and beats to figure out people's emotional reaction, and then he actually composed a song based on the reaction he wanted to evoke, and it went to the top of Spotify, and he's got 20 million downloads, and it was a completely machine collaboration song, right? And it was all about picking out conversations and what's the emotion in conversations. It was very clever. But you could extend that to say, I've got a set of facts. I want to evoke emotional reaction around those facts. These people, I need to put that arc around it, and these people, I need to put that arc around it, and these people, I need to put that arc around it. So maybe, you can write for Breitbart and MSNBC at the same time.
Ooh, wow. Yeah. Or you could convince more people that climate change is real. God's work.
You have to decide that that's the emotion you want to
Then you need
evoke.
Distribution, you need other things, but yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of telling the story, machine learning can help you understand what reaction there is to a story. That's a known fact. Did people understand it, and did they act on it?
Other just obvious functions that it could do, finding anomalies. Is that a function of this or not? Knowing, having a data set, which we don't tend to have much in journalism, but if we started to get that, where I'm going here is where's the journalist in this? What's the job of journalism in this? But understanding crime statistics, understanding discrimination, understanding the basis of inequality, understanding sickness across geography and dietary habits. Is that journalism? Is that the stuff? I mean, is it finding out
finding out why and what to do. I mean, the machines can do the correlations better than people.
Right.
And can collect and absorb and cross-reference more data. I think that journalism can help. Listen, I mean, part of journalism has always been about shining a light on things and making it transparent. So when there's hidden data, it can find it and bring it forward. And I think that can then the machine can actually find all the correlations from that data much faster. So it can be, one is to bring forward more data. Two is when there is data and you find a correlation or an inference, figure out, what's next, what does that mean for people, what's the inference from that? That takes real thought. And then that thought can go back into the AI algorithms to help. you can turn that into math, and then you can check more facts, and that can give you more ideas, and you can go back and forth together. So.
Sentiment analysis. One of my entrepreneurial graduates used Watson to one of its APIs to bring sentiment analysis.
Yep.
Who's using that for what?
Well, people marketing a product or themselves as a product in an election can absolutely check sentiment analysis. And
how good is it?
It's quite predictive.
It is.
It's quite predictive at the individual level and the cohort level. I think that the sentiments that are beyond just my reaction, but whether I feel so strongly I take an action, are key. And people do react more out of fear than they do out of, hope and happiness. So
especially now,
figuring out how to evoke the right action because of the right sentiment is something you can actually figure out where it worked and how it worked. And
if we could calm down the country, right? If that were so, I keep on trying to teach entrepreneurial journalism here. So I imagine somebody coming along and recreating journalism, So you go to this goal.
Creating like Prozac journalism,
kind of, yeah.
Calm everybody down.
Yeah. Or convince them that climate change is real. I mean, yes, you have a view. Then it's not. There's no argument about objectivity. There are facts, but there's a belief that the facts lead to a conclusion. And God damn it, the other fact that we know is people don't believe it. Too many people don't believe it. So how do you solve that? And what's ethical to use to solve that?
So a lot of the sentiment analysis always comes down to how did people take this personally? So what did it mean to them personally? So I don't think the issue is to teach them people will believe climate change is real when they believe it is solvable, and the solution won't be a huge problem for them. People would like to believe,
or is a lesser problem than the other problems, at least. Yes.
In the near term.
In the near term, right. In their term, yes.
I mean, a lot of the challenge here, calming people down is to have them take a perspective longer than the next month. So, sentiment analysis could give you some clues as to how people are reacting. It might help you personalize the argument to different people as opposed to making one mass argument, and that could help you. Sentiment over a conversation is usually stronger than sentiment on a one-way reaction. Okay. So then, I think I think part of the issue is how does journalism become part of a conversation is going to be key.
Amen, brother. Amen. Yes, that's exactly. So we have a program here in social journalism that helps start that exactly believes it starts with a conversation.
Isn't all journalism going to be social journalism?
I hope so. That's exactly the goal. We're going to take over the world.
Well, no, it's just I just look at what's actually working from a sentiment analysis, right? And so then I would go back to. So I'm just.
Well, it also starts with the premise of social journalism.
You can tell me didn't give me the questions in advance, so I'm thinking real.
I didn't have the questions in advance, so it's okay.
I'm doing this real time,
that's where we both are, yeah.
The sentiments that are stronger. And in the American election, one candidate was better at having conversations than the other, right? And and therefore the sentiments were.
Well, it depends on the kind of conversation you like to have.
If your whole point is to evoke a emotional reaction.
That's the scary. If that is the point, if we're lost there, if this country will never elect an Angela Merkel, a technocrat again, if we're always stuck with emotion, isn't your desire as a scientist?
Dude, what's TV today?
Yeah, but
what's the entertainment side? How much of it's reality television?
I know, but here you are bridging. So you have the one world of the marketer where you appeal to emotions, and you understand how to do that. But the other world is you're a scientist, and you're around scientists, and you're trying to get to ground truth and facts and rationality. And we're running the country based on emotion, and that's the same problem with Watson and clickbait. If that's the goal, we're fucked.
Well, we
already are. I don't know.
No, it's the goal. It's the reality. It's where we are, right? It's where we are. I would say when my ground truth is what did people believe, and more importantly, how did they act?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I end up with them. Why do we have sentiment analysis in the Watson corpus? We didn't need it to win Jeopardy. You needed there's no emotion in a Jeopardy question. We needed it because in order to get people to act, you have to appeal to emotion. Everything is emotional. So at the end of the day, if I need people to evacuate coastal cities in India when
you want to scare the shit out of them at the right moment. Yeah.
If I need people to evacuate North Carolina Outer Banks when there's a hurricane, and when I need people to realize that maybe Sandy is a serious problem for southern Manhattan, you have to scare the crap out of them, and you have to you have to appeal to them like, take action, now it's a flight. So, all
emotion's not bad in that case. Okay, I
emotion,
agree.
I think it's essential, right? So I think the days of just reporting the facts in a straightforward way without leading to an emotional conversation, because conversations tend to be emotional.
So James Carey, the legendary Columbia journalism professor, said in Jay Rosen's summary of his words that the job of journalism is not to inform the conversation, but to be informed by the conversation.
Okay.
So in your string, if we rethink, because what I've been leading you toward, not knowing where we're both going to go, is to fundamentally rethink journalism and the string of journalism, right? And so I was looking at that. We have the facts, and we got to make those fuckers believe it. Pardon my language. Instead, it almost turns around. You want to listen to the public. You want to listen to the conversation. You want to understand the sentiment. What are people scared about? What are they wrong about? What are they confused about? What do they need to know? What are their goals? And then how do we understand how to bring them ground truth, understanding, questions, and so on, that help them, and then how do we judge our success or failure based on whether we've changed that? That would be a radically different string of journalism from we have facts, we put it in this thing called content, and we give it to them, and if they don't read it to them, well, it's their own damn fault. That's a very different string of what journalism could do, aided by technology. But first, I keep on thinking, it was to present. First is to listen.
Oh, I totally agree with yes.
Right?
I agree with that. Right. So, and you know journalism far better than I would say in the AI world where I'm covering a lot of fields, the fields that are making the most progress absolutely use 2 ears and 1 mouth in exactly that proportion. Okay. It's really important because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that they heard you, they understood you, and they acted on it. Yes. So you have to start with where they are.
And that's radically different from what we do now, right? We thought we were the gatekeeper to information and authority, right? And instead, you turn it around. What it also means is the politicians and marketers need to be better at listening. And they probably are better at listening than we are. They exploit it.
Well, the ones who are winning.
Yes.
We might not like.
Yep.
Because they might be less fact-based, but they listened better, right? And connected, right? So
I was at F8 last week.
And I think this is true for marketers of products.
Yeah.
Everything we're doing in health is how to get people to actually act in healthy ways. The biggest problem with health is that people don't do what they're supposed to do. Yeah. They know what they're not supposed to eat, but they don't like it. Yes. And they know what they're not supposed to drink, and they don't like it. So helping get to people where they are.
Yeah, I saw a fascinating exchange on Facebook, I think this morning. Glenn Reynolds, the Instant Pundit, linked to a piece that said that settled science said that this is what nutrition should be, and look, it screwed us all up. We all became obese because we paid attention to fat and not to sugar, right? And somebody said in the comments, don't presume that settled science is now wrong when it comes to climate change.
So, some of the most interesting AI work on the planet Earth right now is at the Vatican.
Oh, talk about that.
It's on exactly this topic, right? So there's a department of AI. This Pope gets this. And we all see the things we like, and how he's like reaching to the poor, and he believes. Wow. Like I was like, why is there this AI department in the Vatican? Like, and they're awesome. Like top scientists. This priest. This guy left his like science job and invested. He was in a bank doing like
making money,
programmatic trading, and he like went to be a priest to like bring AI and it's because they believe it's to this issue of where's our moral authority? How do we help people know right or wrong? How do we help people know where to believe?
Jesus.
And how do we make sure that this AI context is rooted in the truth of what's right and wrong? And so it's just fascinating, all the things they're finding. And it's a lot about this being where people are. And
So if God can use it, so can the devil.
oh, for sure. And he does. They both. This,
Both do.
They're on. This is a mission-driven Vatican.
So the Vatican is aware that the devil's using the same
They
technology.
so
That's why they're doing it.
Their point. It's a little bit like why Elon Musk founded OpenAI.
Yeah.
Their point is, it's going to be used for evil, so that we better use it for good ahead of the people using it for evil.
Fear not, I'm going to come out in a minute, but I'm having too much fun, so let me just go another minute here.
Well, but if you want to be on, if journalism is on the side of good,
Right. But that means we've got to decide what good is.
I would just say other people who care about what is good and have their view of what is good are embracing this heavily and rethinking their whole model in a world where people are,
Well, while you're on that, what other surprising uses of AI are there out there? That's a good one.
I think it's been very interesting to find rogue traders, anti-money laundering, back to the algorithms. If the ground truth is that most people are honest and truthful, you can find criminals much faster.
Okay.
I would say in the whole, you can have different opinions about sort of the NSA and all of that. But I would say in the broad world of keeping the world safe, AI is better able to model and predict a criminal mind than any, right?
Because it's the anomaly.
And criminals are narrow, right? And they have a mission. And so the ability to actually model the criminal mind and then predict where it will go and get there before they do.
Yeah, the original James Risen story in the Times about the warrantless wiretaps, my original interpretation of that, which turned out to be only partly right and partly wrong, but that there was a desire to get a database in which to then be able to spot the anomalies.
Totally.
Right?
I think that was...
It was the original, part of the original motive. It then it got corrupted. But so then the issue is we're all part of that database, so you can find the rogue.
You do need to be able to do that. And then when you find the rogue, you really want to go deep on the rogue, build a model of where the rogue would go next. What else would the rogue consider? How would the rogue think about it?
Right.
Because, so you actually predict the path of the rogue, so you get to the place the rogue is going to be before they've even gotten there.
What about education? You mentioned that earlier. How will all this change the way we teach?
So different people learn in different ways. So, Watson's watched all the Khan Academy videos, watched all the TED Talks. I think this ability...
The TED Talk thing may corrupt Watson, I don't know.
It doesn't say whether they're right or wrong, but it helps people understand can you find certain things you want in those without watching all the minutes. But I would say the early days, and then we do a lot of stuff with the Sesame Street workshop on like early childhood, which is probably the best work. Just kids are learning in different ways, so the more we can actually give them the next story based on how they learn, the more we can do personal interactive things. We're doing stuff with kids who are in hospitals with stuffed animals that are teaching. We do stuff in Africa where there are no teachers. So they're just totally taught by a robot. And they're actually, different people are learning in different ways, and they're actually learning faster than if they're learning in a classroom. So,
and going back to this journalism question of what do they know, what do they absorb? In education, is it testing? How do you know whether it's been successful? How do you put the data back to the hypothesis about whether this was a good or bad educational technique?
So two things. There is testing, right? Do they comprehend? But I think the other thing, and Cynthia Brazil is doing this at MIT Media Lab, is curiosity. Like, are they asking more questions? The best way to know you've taught somebody something is not what do they know on the test, is do they have the curiosity to ask the next question?
Which it goes back to listening.
Right? Because that means they're engaged. They've joined the conversation. They're beginning to reason what's next. What else could this mean?
And when they ask the next question, you presume they were satisfied with an answer at the last one.
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
So
They may not always be the case, but yes.
No, it's inference. You never know for sure, but you're definitely finding this sort of engagement, and certainly people are becoming illiterate. And
Okay, so I want to ask you one more question, then I'll come out to the room. Advertising, given your stellar career in advertising, digital advertising, is it doomed? Is mass advertising in reach the ruination? Is programmatic making context and environment worthless? Where are we headed?
So there's far too many impressions, and so it's just this cacophony of noise, yes. Which makes it far less effective, right? Just people don't respond to it, they ignore it, they click out. Right? So it's seriously been overdone. So the question is, can we build a model with fewer ads that are more relevant to people? One of the things I'm working on with Watson ads is actually ads that are conversational. Oh. So we have conversational ads about Flonase. We have conversational ads about Claritin. So there's some over-the-counter stuff. There's some stuff about cars. Campbell Soup has a conversational ad about what to eat for dinner, which is pretty interesting.
Lot world. As long as I don't have to talk about creepy Trivago.
Well, you might.
Ooh. Ooh.
If it helps you find the right place.
Oh, no. That's the bridge too far.
Right. But so I would just say, ads that are really helpful to people are going to be the ones that, at the end of the day, people don't run ads to get impressions. They run ads to get an outcome. They want people to buy their product. So finding the best way to...
And relevance is value to the advertiser at some level.
So listen, the presidential candidate who spent the most money advertising did not win. Yep. Right? And so clearly it's not the holy grail only answer. I think anyone who's got a product to sell has got to think through other ways of doing that. And I think it's got to be the end of this sort of mass programmatic cheap advertising.
Amen. Well, will advertising still be around to support media? Will media be separated from advertising?
No. I mean, it kind of has to be. I don't think you're going to get their totally unpaid subscriptions for people to get there.
I want advertising to still have a reason to be around media.
I think the
but
trick...
Here it won't.
I don't think it goes away. No,
okay.
I think people need to sell their products. It's a way to communicate it. I think the trick is, as they become more conversational and data-driven, how does news help inform the ad and ad help inform the news? Yeah. I'm not in for fake, editorial stuff.
No.
But I think the context needs to evolve. I think it's harder for news. The entertainment side is doing a much better and easier job getting the product to be part of their story. Yep. I don't want to see news do that, but I got to think through what is the alternative. Because it's got to be more natural. Because there's definitely a lot of...
I think there's also other revenue streams like commerce, but I'll shut up now.
Oh, that's good too. Yes. Yeah. Hi.
Do you know whether anybody... I had the impression that there are speech patterns. If you listen to a cult leader, if you listen to Alex Jones' InfoWars, if you look at fake news, I think there are speech patterns. Do you know if anybody is using either Watson or any AI at all to identify and red flag those kind of speech patterns? The speech patterns that are being used to mislead people in malicious ways.
So it's used in law enforcement to see if people are lying when they're interviewed, right? So there's long been techniques that humans have used to sort of do lie detection. And machine learning is getting better at that. So the question is, could you now apply that to someone lying to a group of people? And then you have to figure out whether they're intentionally lying or they actually believe the lie they're saying. Because that's the tricky part is we're much better at identifying...
with our president.
I'm not going to comment on that. But
well, that's the argument in journalism is, do you call it a lie? You can only call it a lie, say some, if you know the intent.
Well, that's true. So in law enforcement, people tend to lie to protect their asses. So they're lying and they know they're lying. It's a tricky balance about, we do believe it's different if they're lying, but they don't know they're lying because they've come to believe their own thing. It's called pathological liar. And I think that's how we're trying to solve it.
You won't comment on that either. Indrani. Good to see you again.
A specific individual, but hi.
Are there particular characteristics of the problem that Watson can be applied to that make it more predictive that do a better job, basically? Like you've talked about healthcare and climate change and journalism, obviously, but what kind of things do you think make the best predictions, make Watson work the best?
Yeah, so those are more advanced edge of the science stuff right now, and I think those are sort of 3, 4, 5 years away. Today, what Watson, so when you bring Watson into your organization, it's kind of like a, intern. It's like very basic level. What it's good at helping you apply for auto insurance and knowing what auto insurance for you. Watson has been awesome. You probably saw the ads from H&R Block. Watson's been great at helping you do your taxes because we always, we've had computerized tax support for a while from TurboTax and others, but when it was combined with the human, it was able to ask the right questions to find deductions that people hadn't found on their own. So a third of people found deductions that neither they nor the preparer had thought of going in. And then as those deductions actually work, then that trains the system for others. So things that are learnable, rules-based are, it helps. Banks all around the world are beginning to use it for customer support. Cable companies are starting to use it for customer support. So those sort of basic things are going to be helpful. I think it's going to be very helpful. It's going to be a very good Uber driver. It can learn the roads. The only problem with autonomous cars is they won't speed. They read speed limits and then they follow them. They follow all rules. But if everyone follows all the rules, then we can change the speed limits. Then we can actually create new rules about distance between the next cars. So those kinds of rote tasks are rule-based rote tasks. They're more learnable.
And sufficient data to be able to learn.
You're talking about very sophisticated, what is a fact. That's why it's going to take a much longer time. It will help. It's knowable that this is the speed limit. It's knowable what one-way streets are. It's knowable fastest route from A to B. The only thing that's not knowable is what the other drivers are going to do. If all cars were autonomous, it would be a very safe, clean, wonderful world.
Nick.
Unless you're an Uber driver.
So journalists tend to be a skeptical bunch, right?
Thank
so
God.
There's the old saying, if your mother says she loves you, check it out. So if Watson says XYZ is a fact, as a journalist, why should I trust that? So I kind of wanted to ask if you could drill into things like how do we make AI accountable to people who are using it? And I'm sure this comes up in the medical domain. I'm mostly interested in the journalistic domain of using technologies in the newsroom. But this issue of explainability, when AI or algorithms are making decisions, how do we use those decisions and come to trust those decisions so that we can operate efficiently with those systems?
So I think that's a really important part of the field. And explainability is key. So yeah, people who are using Watson to make decisions on whether to give someone a mortgage, to approve a mortgage or not, right? How do you make sure that it's not being redlined, right? How do you make sure that there's not bias? In criminal justice, in intelligence, huge issues. And the truth is, predictions are never a fact. By definition, they're a prediction. They're an inference. So what we are doing in explainability, and people who coded, I know there's one person, if you've coded with Watson, the inference it gives you, it then gives you the supporting evidence. And it says 72% from this, 22% from this, 5% from that. So then you can use your own judgment as to whether that's right or wrong.
That's bad data. That's questionable data. Watson didn't know that, but I do.
Or I'm just skeptical that I've seen that. Now, I have to say the other side of it is, so this is how we do the weather forecast, right? And there's a whole bunch of things that factor in the weather forecast. And we went to explainability, and then we allowed the skeptical meteorologists to override the system, and then we tracked the times they overrode the system. 77% of the time they overrode the system, they made the forecast worse because they were just putting their judgment on it. So if your skepticism of whether something is true or not, then you have an obligation to go figure out if it's true.
You've got to be skeptical.
Or you have to use pressures. You have to find a way to improve the fact. Just to say, my belief, I don't think that's true. That doesn't resonate with what I think. That can't possibly be true. It may be. It may be. So, but I do think that we have an obligation in a field to give you the underlying logic in an explainable way. Otherwise, I think we're in the black box of, and if somebody's going to decide whether I'm informedness, then they better tell me how they came to that conclusion.
Yeah.
So, I have a question. It's actually related to a conference I was at today. New York City Media Lab had a Machines Plus Media conference all day, which was interesting. And just for people who don't know, there was an AP report on AI in the news as it applies to news that came out earlier this month. It's a nice analysis. But what was interesting is there were lots of news organizations at this conference, not Google, not Facebook, and not IBM. So
Well, we're not a news organization.
yes, but I'm curious, is journalism and news businesses and media other than financial, are they any significant use of Watson, and is that on your radar for Watson?
So the entertainment side of media uses us much more than the news side today. So for prioritizing, reading scripts, seeing emotional reactions, will people like it or not, proposing new ideas, helping this guy with music, movie trailers, helping people to know what's, so there's a lot of things, and in fact, even writing scripts, right? And certainly headlines. So I would say in the entertainment world, where you don't have to be as factual, we've made more progress. You mentioned narrative science. It's beginning to be around the edges, but I would say more around financial news than other categories today, just because the value of time is so important, and it's being used as sort of the first read of a press release or an earnings report, and then more depth comes behind it by humans. So that's kind of where it is today. But it will evolve.
It's paradoxical that emotion is such a good data set for this machine. That the emotion of entertainment works so well.
Well, and that's why the entertainment guys like it. So the trick is,
right.
I think the news people have to get over themselves and realize that emotion is just as important in news as it is in all other forms of entertainment. And a lot of people view news as entertainment.
Yeah.
Isn't there really a difference between emotion and sentiment, though? There's a group at Wayne State that's focused on identifying emotion as opposed to sentiment, and they claim they predicted the election in Florida and winning on election day. And they predicted Brexit the day before based on their emotional reads, even though the sentiment analysis wasn't predicted. What they say is,
I agree.
What you're
Gut.
Yep.
Mouth versus gut.
And emotion drives action more than sentiment. I agree with that.
So yesterday, I'm not sure if you saw, there's something called, I think it was Lyrebird. So they can take 1 minute of any voice and convert it to say anything. So obviously in the fake news epidemic, this is very scary. It's out of Montreal. So one thing, Watson, it's an open API. We actually use the Alchemy API, and now we've been using it for a while. How are you guys going to...
Great Lyrebird?
Well, not quite, but as...
Great personalized newsletters, don't worry.
As Watson gets more powerful, how are you guys going to kind of regulate or think about who's using the API and how are they using it? Especially, obviously, there's benefits of being completely open and having great things built on top of it, but is that something you guys are worried about?
We're very worried about it. And it's a conundrum, right? Because who are we to decide who can use it and not use it? So we have if you went to Alchemy, you probably didn't read it, but when you clicked off, I agree to that whole thing. It said that we have the ability to withdraw the service if you use it for illegal, dishonest, or several means, which give us a fair amount of leeway to come back if it's misused. So that part, and we have done that for a couple of cases.
Any example?
Selling guns to minors.
Oh, good. Thank you for thank you. That counts as evil, yeah.
That's evil. Is illegal. It crosses every
line you need, yeah. Right.
Every line of that, user agreement, right?
To put brain power into that, God, that's sick.
they were trying to figure out how to teach minors how to fake their age so they could get the guns. So it's not something we wanted to be associated with.
No.
So, right, somebody did, but nobody, no good person would want to do that. So the trick is to get people to I keep going back to the power of crowds. We have to have somebody to report back that it was used for evil purposes.
Yes.
And we have to build our own capabilities. But we tend to rely on law enforcement very
But it's all hosted, right? I mean, it's so at some level you're going to need to know what's happening on your servers, even though you don't use the data. You don't, my data is my data. At some level, you've got to know that, don't you?
Yeah, well, but you don't know it all because they can pull the algorithms to do the conversational interface without the whole back end. And criminals are pretty good about dividing things up, and so they're not hosting their website on the server. They're just calling the API into whatever they're going to do it on.
Back in the back first.
A lot of challenges in terms of investigative journalism. What do you think will be the ethical challenges in the future? Because we have a lot of sources and we have different sources clandestinely working together, such as 4chan, to get information on private citizens, such as some of the people who were involved in the Berkeley riots. What do you think that will do for AI?
I don't know. I mean, I'm very concerned about that. I'm concerned about using AI to fabricate things, which is also bad. And certainly it's becoming easier to... I do believe privacy really matters. I do believe and people have been loose about their privacy because they've gotten benefit from sharing it all. But, really good, honest people are going to get injured by this. So then, is privacy going to become more important? And as privacy becomes more important, then AI has to be done in a way that respects that privacy. And we have a lot of privacy rules on it, but I haven't seen in America the same focus on privacy that I see in parts of Europe. So I look at sort of the way we're being used in Germany, where there's a lot of concern about this. I would just say that the way it's used is designed to respect privacy, whereas here it's more loose. That could change with this kind of thing happening. That'd be how I think about it.
Yeah, one question about, I'm here. As it seems easier to make people believe than to provide them the truth. Don't you think that you could help journalists understanding what makes a malicious way of using AI to reduce, in fact, malicious ways?
We could, and I think we, some other intermediary can be formed that uses it to solve it. So, I don't know whether I don't know whether we'd be the right people to do it, or if it's got to be people who know journalism better. But I certainly think we could help somebody with the tools build something that's simpler to use for the less technical audience to be able to build on it and to get value. So we're always looking for people to build on the platform. I do think that there's going to be more technology tools for journalists. It should be an interesting business that somebody goes after. And I think the other thing is, as some news organizations build those tools, I hope they choose to share them.
Yes, I agree.
Unlike your friends at Google and Facebook who don't share as much as they should.
So Miguel, then here, then there, and then we're done. Okay. So quick questions, please.
Okay. Many of the examples of like the dystopian things that we see have to do with the 3 laws of robotics of Asimov, in a way that may not injure a human being, et cetera, et cetera. You know better than I do. How does that work in the sense of crowdsourcing and having more eyes looking at the data, but also having more people in IBM Watson working and detecting eventual issues like those? Yeah, basically that.
Yeah. So you may have seen Microsoft launched a bot called Tay, right? And the wrong crowd taught it the wrong things, right? It taught it very evil, terrible things. This is why, you know, crowdsourcing matters when it's the right crowd with the right purpose, right? So I'm very happy to have crowdsourced oncology annotators on my oncology exam, and I'm very glad to have, you know, crowdsourced radiology train my radiology algorithms. I don't want the people in this room to do that because you're not good at reading x-rays. So, and then granted, we do work more in business settings than in consumer, because I think in consumer the challenge is how do you get a big enough crowd or the right crowd, because otherwise you introduce the crowd's bias, which unfortunately can become self-fulfilling.
Or gaming the system, too.
Pardon?
Or purposely gaming the system just for the lulls.
Of course people will do that, right? So that's why you have to kind of solve it. But it's a real issue. It's a real issue.
Dawn, and then there, and then we're done.
Hi, David.
Hey, Dawn.
I just wanted to talk. A lot of newsrooms today are developing bots and using bots, and it's kind of a fad in my opinion. This morning we were playing with the IBM bots. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on bots in newsrooms, if you have any thoughts, and what Watson
They're using them to deliver the news?
apps, different things. I mean, it's, for lack of a better term, it's just them reaching for something new, I think, to see what works. But in terms of artificial intelligence and Watson in particular, like, how do you see any synergy between newsroom bots and AI, and your AI in particular, or no?
Well, you know,
will it work?
We have a bot framework, and people. I'm glad to see the bots used for customer service. And you have to be careful that it's faddish. Everybody wanted to launch something on, you know, Facebook Messenger, and check that box. You know,
tablets were going to save us.
A lot of people had MySpace pages too in the day. Yeah. So, you know, I think the bot thing got overhyped, honestly, for phase one. Where I think it can be useful is if the newsrooms decide to be listening rooms and they decide to be conversational. What's helpful about a bot is not that it delivered the news. What's helpful about the bot is it asks a question, heard an answer. So, you know, and that's a higher order of bots. So she happened to be at C. Watson today, and we put Watson inside these little cardboard robots called TJ Bot. But what's important about those is actually the microphones and the cameras.
I told it to turn on the light, and the light went on. And then I said, turn the light red, and the light turned red. So it was speech recognition.
Yep.
Luke was playing with it, and you saw what it did. You just kept talking, and it kept reacting to everything Luke and I were saying, and the transcript was coming up on the screen.
What I haven't seen is people using bots to actually monitor the conversation and get people to talk with it.
This is what I was talking about earlier.
This would actually help the newsroom better connect into that conversation.
Start with the conversation.
And be a part of it.
Over here.
Hello. I publish a local online media outlet. We also have a newspaper. About 10% of what we publish is investigative reporting, things that have real impact on the community. About 90% of what we publish is probably repurposed content from other places, reworking press releases, getting box scores from sporting events, weather reports, things like that. I'd like to spend 0% of my time doing that 90% and all of our time doing the 10% that adds value in our community. Is Watson something, or AI something that can help us do that, so that we are devoting most of our time and energy into the things that actually have value in our community?
Why not? I mean, that's the kind of rules-based kind of work that can be done. I mean, in the end of the day, I don't believe that AI is going to take away human jobs. I think it's going to take away boring rote work to free up capacity for the humans who want to spend their time creating and solve. There's a lot of unsolved problems which can be solved. So that's my hope for the work generally. So I would love to see it in your case be the same, where it's actually able to automate more of those tasks.
Matter, right? So I have a limited budget, but I want to go buy this today. Can I go subscribe, pay money, and not have to pay a fortune to start working in that direction, to start basically crunching press releases and box scores and weather reports to produce content that's hyper-local, in my case, you know, a small city, about 80,000 people in New York?
Yeah, and listen, this is what we were trying to do with Patch, right? So it's, yes, so no, I don't have an application all built to do that. There may be some out there, we'd have to look. What you can do is get the API services so you compose something. You'll need a developer, right? It's not a lot of money, but you need somebody to actually compose it into something that solves your problem. But that is actually the kind of problem I mean, just looking at how we were able to do headlines and stuff. It's a problem you should be able to solve pretty quickly, and it may be a business that somebody wants to solve for multiple publishers like yours.
That's a platform company in that way. One last question.
You can build it off the APIs.
One last question for you. So I sense your fine marketing entertainment hand in giving Watson literally the voice and the face and the personality.
So that was before my time, actually.
Was it before your time?
That was the voice. They needed a voice to compete on Jeopardy.
Jeopardy, right.
So it's the same voice.
But still, in the advertising that exists now, why do you advertise Watson? What's the goal of the advertising of Watson?
So, and I evolved it. So it used to be to create the promise. As of 9 months ago, all advertising for Watson features products that exist in the world today. So Woodside Oil and Gas, or what we're doing around golf, or what we're doing in health. These are all real things that exist today that you can actually use today. And the reason we advertise is to help society understand that AI is actually helpful. It's not big evil robot.
It's not HAL.
That it is solving new problems that couldn't be solved today. That gives you hope and aspiration. For the users of it, we're also trying to be clear. This is like the internet in 1995, 96. It's not the internet in 1989. Right. And so you need to get on with it. So it's helping to build conversation. I also think that a lot of the AI world is getting defined by Facebook, Google, Amazon, because people have Alexas, and so it's very consumer oriented. And people just assume that that's going to be the direction. It's not going to be bots for Facebook. And we're like, actually, there's a whole bunch of sort of higher order, more sophisticated, more precise business, private data set kind of stuff that you need this model for.
David, I knew this would be fascinating, and I'm really grateful for a long time, but I'm sure we all want to thank David.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out on a rainy night.
Thank you for the work you do. We need journalists.